Sup team, if you've seen my Alphys Neo video, you already know how much of an Alphys praiser I am. Not glaze, praise. I'm sure many of y'all are Alphys fans too. So, let us imagine for a second. Imagine all of us Alphys praisers wrangled together in a room, and we have the time machine. The time machine, the one from eugenics. Picture this. We use the time machine from eugenics to travel into the past, about a decade or so ago. Our target time is anywhere between September 2015, Undertale's release, and probably 2018-2019. Let's say, hypothetically, the time machine from eugenics plops us down to a convention, a fan convention. Everyone's dressed up as Sans. Not a lot of biodiversity here, but we love Alphys. They don't love Alphys. They despise Alphys, actually, and they chase us out with pitchforks. Luckily, Convoy has super luck and free nerf Fists of Fate Plus from eugenics and buys his time to escape. Thanks, Convoy.
Why do they hate Alphys so much anyway?
I don't really know, Convoy. This is such a foreign concept in the modern day, but back then, Alphys was disliked en masse. I don't know if I'd say it was the majority, but she was easily the most hated Undertale character during peak fandom, and that's for a variety of reasons. I think the fandom's past distaste for her is best summed up with her notifications in Hotland. To this day, people are annoyed by these suckers, and from a gameplay perspective I can see why, but that annoyance usually extends to Alphys' character itself. I think this runs a lot deeper than unavoidable dialogue, though. Take Asgore and Deltarune, for example. There's an unavoidable, unskippable cutscene of him being pretty undeniably weird, yet he receives little scrutiny for this. And at the end of Deltarune Chapter 4, Toriel and Sans dance and drink the night away. But tell me, have you seen discourse about Sans' actions in this scene, or Toriel's? More often than not, Toriel faces the brunt of the blame. Even in Undertale, I've personally seen fans get a lot more passionate about Toriel scolding Asgore for not collecting the souls more efficiently than they are for Asgore, actually doing the killing. Why are these cases? I've been asking myself that for a long time. Then I thought about it more. The hate is stacked toward women characters. Toriel has received more hate than Sans and Asgore, and Alphys has received probably more past hate than those three combined. Is there a correlation here? I don't know, but I sure as hell want to find out. We're going to do something very different today. I want you all to find the answer to a question alongside me, and it may sound controversial, but hear me out. Did Alphys receive the hate that she used to get because of her gender? Would the fandom's past perception of her have been different if she wasn't a woman? What if Alphys was a man? Before we begin, I seriously need to preface that I don't know a lot about gender studies. I am by no means a professional. I doubt I'm even close to being a beginner. This video won't be me preaching to people to, quote, do better. This question just genuinely has me curious, and I want to find an answer regardless of how qualified I am. I figured we could find that answer together since I've never really done something like this. Nothing in this video will be me suggesting that Alphys should have been written as a man to avoid backlash either. That's just absurd, but I feared someone would get that out of this, so yeah. Get anything out of this video besides I think Alphys should have been a man, okay?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
let's go. When I first thought of acting upon the question of what if Alphys was a man, my mind immediately jumped to another character, Skyler White from Breaking Bad. Similar to Alphys, Skyler's character has received significant amounts of fandom-wide hate, so much so that Anna Gunn, her actress, has received online harassment herself. She writes about this in an op-ed for the New York Times, claiming that, quote, one such post read, "Could somebody tell me where I can find Anna Gunn so I can kill her?" I knew that finding out what made Skyler's hate tick would be a huge step toward finding out why Alphys used to get so much hate. So I started searching. Hazel Works' Skyler the Bad Wife, Gender and Agency in Breaking Bad, from Undertale University was an incredibly useful paper for this. I'm linking everything down below, by the way. While this paper does kind of have choppy grammar sometimes, maybe questions credibility, Work has been a lecturer at Undertale for decades in sociology and, quote, gender, crime, and culture. Typically, I would try and find more papers, but a surprisingly little amount of people have written about this academically speaking. Usually I would do better, usually I'd cover my bases, but we need something here. Work argues that, in media, men are typically written as socially active agents, while women are typically written as domestically passive characters. This especially applies to marriage and family dynamics, and that prospect already adds fuel to the fire regarding Skyler's character. In Breaking Bad, Skyler believes that marriage is an equal relationship, where both parties can be anywhere on this passive to active spectrum, which goes against the patriarchal norm. At the show's beginning, both Walter and Skyler are in a place of passivity. Walter's discontentment with this passivity is what kickstarts the show's conflict, and as a result, Walter moves towards the stereotypical active agent role throughout the show, while Skyler involuntarily moves towards a passive victim role. That is calling her a victim because of how Heisenberg treats her, even though she absolutely is a victim in that sense. Work uses the term victim as a direct opposite to an agent. A victim is trapped in a role of passivity, while an agent is active and able to spread their wings. Please keep this distinction in mind when I call Skyler a, quote, victim. She is a victim in the sense of the word, but this is what I truly mean by it. It's crucial to understand that Skyler involuntarily shifts towards the stereotypically passive role, while Walter shifts to an active role by design. Skyler's defiant femininity, quote, gets in the way, as Work puts it from the perspective of Skyler's detractors. Skyler's refusal of passivity directly stands in the way of Heisenberg's active development, and by extension, the main plot of Breaking Bad. This makes her an irritant for many fans. This reasoning alone makes it clear why Skyler's hated. Until you think about Hank Schrader. By all accounts, Hank also gets in the way of Breaking Bad's plot. He is the exact opposite role in universe to Heisenberg. DEA agent versus drug kingpin. His job is literally to bust criminals like Heisenberg. So why hasn't he received fandom-wide vitriol? Well, Hank is already this macho masculine character. He slots into his role as a traditional man very well. Skyler, on the other hand, goes against stereotypical feminine passivity, meaning that she does not and does not want to be slotted into her expected gender norms. Paired with her developments later in the show, where she sometimes has to play into traditional femininity, this makes Skyler readable as disingenuously or improperly feminine to some. And even though Hank does reach victimhood by the show's end, since he's always slot into his traditional role as a man just fine, his character was never outwardly against gender norms, and thus it didn't strike a chord with viewers. Skyler's character intrinsically represents progressively feminine traits and is outwardly imperfect. Skyler's progressivity, blocking Heisenberg's way, is punished much more harshly than Hank's traditionality, and that issue only arises due to gender norms, since that's where the passive-active spectrum comes from to begin with. Thus, Skyler's gender is a primary catalyst for fans hating her character. Her progressive femininity is unavoidable, and that is key. Things are starting to sound a bit more familiar now, aren't they? One of the most hated things about Alphys was how much screen time she was given, like in Hotland with your phone's push notifications. And Alphys isn't traditionally feminine to boot. Even if she doesn't have some dominant agent juxtaposing her, she's still far outside the norm, and she isn't passive either, far from it. Exploration of the deepest parts of her character is mandatory for the true pacifist ending, and that comes from her actually making amends with herself on screen, something that many women aren't given the chance to do in media. And to top it all off, she's bi! Thank you for being gay! Thank you! And there's also no way around her bisexuality in the true pacifist ending. So this all puts Alphys in a very similar position to Skyler, and now it makes so much sense why her character used to be hated in mass. Both characters are progressively feminine, and how their characters associate with their gender is far outside the mold. Most importantly, their femininity is unavoidable. Audiences are forced to interact with characters breaking out of long-standing gender traditions, and I think the best way I can put it is that people just aren't as open to appreciating new things. And voila! Fandom-wide hatred. But I'm still confused, though. We were able to figure out why Hank didn't receive as much hate as Skyler, but in Alphys' case, she has Undyne. Undyne doesn't really get hate at all, neither today or back then. The most you see is just people being like generally homophobic, which is a lot more cut and dry, and I don't feel like researching why people are bigots. That's out my scope. But Undyne is progressively feminine too. She is not traditional by any means. Rugged, strong, loud, traits that you'd think Alphys' detractors would scoff at for the same reasons. Her progressive traits are unavoidable as well, with exploration of her character being mandatory for true pacifist progression right alongside Alphys. So now we have a whole new question to answer. Why wasn't Undyne hated too? Another helpful analysis that can steer us in the right direction is the dehumanizing characterizations of the hateable female character by Chloe Vecchio. Full transparency again, this one is not a scholarly work. It's an article on, get this, the Daily Fandom. I would much rather find academic, but Vecchio brings up such good points that I couldn't not reference it. And the Daily Fandom also just sounds like a comically good source for fandom discourse topics. I'm sure whoever's writing anything on here is deep in the trenches themselves, so yeah, we're running it. Vecchio analyzes the double standard that many audiences may have for men's versus women's mistakes that helps us explain the disparity between criticisms towards characters like Sans and Toriel, which in turn helps us explain Undyne's key differences to Alphys. Vecchio uses Rory Gilmore's affair with Dean Forrester in Gilmore Girls as an example of this double standard. Throughout the show, Rory falls in love, out of love, and back in love with Dean, who is a married man by that second time. Rory goes as far as to sleep with Dean, causing probably the most controversial scene for the show's fandom from what I can tell. Can't lie, I've never watched a second of Gilmore Girls. I tried to be as well researched as I could, but from what I can tell, this was their 9/11. Similar to how Sans has received much less slack in Deltarune than Toriel for Chapter 4's ending, Rory received the brunt of the discourse for the miiiight moment. A huge part of the fandom's hatred is that Dean was a much less significant character than Rory, with Rory literally being the main character, but Vecchio brings up an interesting question that made me realize her perspective was perfect for answering my own questions. What if Dean was the main character of Gilmore Girls instead? I mean, he obviously knew he had a wife. He isn't entirely blameless either. Would he be given more or less slack than Rory for this? Vecchio argues that he would not receive as much pushback due to his gender, citing another affair from Grey's Anatomy. In Grey's Anatomy, character Derek Shepherd cheats on his wife with Meredith Grey, a new hospital intern. Contrary to Rory and Dean, Vecchio describes audience reactions to Shepherd's affair as, quote, swoon-worthy. And to add on to the examples, Vecchio cites 10 Things I Hate About You with characters Bianca Stanford and Cameron James. Cameron crafts this entire plan to get around Bianca's strict parents so that he can date her. Since her parents' rule is that Bianca can't date unless her older sister does, Cameron goes as far as to pay off somebody to date Bianca's sister. For fans, though, this is not the controversial part. No. The controversial part is Bianca using Cameron to get with Joey Downer, Cameron's friend who was in on the plan but really loved Bianca all along. Yet again, we see a disparity in how much slack characters receive. The entire film centers around Cameron's scheme, yet Bianca gets the brunt of fandom hatred for getting with Joey in the end. According to Vecchio, audiences basically look at Cameron's side with rose-tinted glasses, similar to Derek Shepherd in Grey's Anatomy. With all these examples stacking up, Vecchio strongly defends her conclusion that there's a double standard in audiences towards men's versus women's mistakes. And I'm sure that sounds obvious to a lot of you guys, double standards, shocker, but I've never really dug into this before. Like, I've had it in the back of my mind, but I've never looked into it. Anyway, in the examples Vecchio uses, gender seemingly has a role to play in how forgiving audiences are towards characters' mistakes. Men and women can have similar flaws, but fandoms will tend to levy their distaste against the women. With this, my mind immediately jumps back to the end of Deltarune Chapter 4. Most of the discourse stemming from this scene is levied against Toriel. You will hardly find in-depth critiques of Sans' character because of this, and if you do find an analysis of his side, there's a good chance it was made by fans just trying to prove that, you know, Sans has flaws too in relation to Toriel. And going back to Undertale, Asgore's complexities regarding the human souls are mostly respected, but oftentimes when Toriel's lines about how Asgore should have collected them are discussed, it's to put some kind of blame on Toriel. In both Undertale and Deltarune, fans feel betrayed by her character. You know, she would not say this, she would not say that. This is what happened to Rory Gilmore as well, as miiiight rubbed fans the wrong way since they deemed it inaccurate to her character from what I can tell. On the other hand, audiences don't feel this sense of betrayal from men unless the character is explicitly written as a traitor. Sans is a perfect example of what happens here. What happened that night? That was just Funny Bone Man doing Funny Bone Man activities. While women are permanently tainted by their flaws, men's flaws and mistakes are seen as quirks. They are protected by what I'm going to call the masculine cushion. God damn it, don't I sound smart? The idea of this masculine cushion is what solves our Undyne dilemma. The fact of the matter is, what makes Undyne a progressive character also makes her more masculine to general audiences. Her rugged, loud personality and her sometimes cartoonish strength is often attributed to men, and her armor design is similar to the predominantly male Royal Guard. This does make sense. An effective way to write a character breaking out typical gender roles is to give them traits from other gender. Just in Undyne's case, this comes at the cost of making her seem masculine to general audiences who only see her at a surface level. Hell, I'm gonna be honest for a second, team. As a wee lad, like when I was like 11 years old, upon first discovering Undertale, I genuinely thought that Undyne was a man for like months. And that wasn't because of her and Alphys' relationship either. My child self just gave her one look and assumed she was a man for the longest time. Now, I'm not saying general audiences have the mind of a child, and obviously nobody's denying she's a woman as a grown person, but other people can at least attest to believing she was a man as a kid. I think this goes to show how Undyne's design, at least during her main encounter, which is players' first impression of her, can easily be read as more masculine than, let's say, Alphys. Thus, Undyne tends to get the grace of the masculine cushion when it comes to her real flaws. It's all subconscious. This is why Undyne's oftentimes mandatory side quests aren't seen as annoying while Alphys' are. Undyne's house date is already a more unserious scene, but when Undyne discusses her flaws, viewers are quicker to let the scene's comedy cushion them. In the True Lab, Alphys' flaws are on full display in the most serious and disturbing area in the entirety of Undertale. There's no room for players to think about anything besides her character in relation to other tragedies. Even if Alphys has had her quirks before, with her unskippable hotline notifications literally being quirks, she isn't masculine enough, quote unquote, to have them respected alongside her flaws. So when her flaws are front and center in an area without any comedy to boot, she is quickly villainized by many because she doesn't have the help of the masculine cushion. With all this in mind, the passive-active spectrum, the masculine cushion, I think we have a clear answer for why Alphys used to receive so much hate. Alphys is untraditionally written, and her progressive traits are on full display in mandatory, very serious areas. She doesn't have comedy to sugarcoat her deepest flaws for audiences, and she doesn't have the masculinity to cushion them either. Exploring her character is mandatory for the extended plot, and as a non-conforming feminine character, those flaws, quote, get in the way for people. Alphys was a widespread irritant because she was unavoidably progressively feminine. Now that we have our answer layered in another answer, it's time to answer our big overarching question. Would Alphys have been treated better by the past fandom as a man? Yes, pretty unequivocally yes. That's probably pretty obvious by now, and you've been waiting for me to say it the whole time. Yes. Yeah. She'd be treated at least a bit better. Now, do I think she would get flawless treatment and be exempt from all hate? No. Her deadly mistake with the Amalgamates is outwardly a controversial, complex situation, even more so than Asgore's soul collection to sell. She wouldn't be without scrutiny as a man, but I think some scenes like her Hotland push notifications would be seen as the quirks that they are, rather than irritations. Best way to think about this is imagining that, like, I don't know, let's say Papyrus wrote those notifications instead. Imagine if Papyrus kept ringing you up in Hotland. Like, that's how it would feel if she was a man. It'd be like, oh, Alphys, you and your quirks. Even if I think Alphys would still receive scrutiny for the Amalgamates, if we take this hypothetical to the extreme, she could be alleviated from all that too. Assuming that nothing changes besides her gender and that her writing stays the exact same, I think that scenario would be impossible, but still, think about it. As a man, Alphys could have the potential to be seen as a badass mad scientist rather than a terrible failure. Both of those are horrible mischaracterizations, but one is praise while the other is hate. Alphys could maybe be on par with, like, I don't know, Frankenstein, which, funny enough, him being a mad scientist is a horrible, terrible mischaracterization in and of itself, so that might prove my point even more. On the most extreme end of this hypothetical possible, she could even be perceived like Heisenberg and be known as the most badass scientist in the game, right next to Gaster. Dare I say, this is meant to sound funny, but I think it's true. If Alphys was a man, she would get stigma edits made out for flaws. So, we have answered my burning question. If Alphys was a man, The parts of her that irritate general audiences would be received as quirks, and on the extreme end she could become a notorious mad scientist whose downfall is directly a source of sympathy and praise. God, man, I am so glad the fandom's gotten over hating Alphys. I think R.T. Reen's Dr. Megalo comic is the best example of how we've gotten over that hump. For Alphys to be portrayed in such a cool way. This would be impossible back in the day. This level of quality in Alphys' writing would probably take her having to be a man in the past. Nobody would give her that much respect back then. It's so... Now I say that, but I haven't read much of Dr. Megalo. Need to keep at it. But from what I've read so far... Oh, Aura! But now we're getting off track. We've answered the question. And we're done here. Thank you all for watching. Thank you so much. Please feel free to shout at me in the comments if I said something stupid. I'm open to discuss. Like, civilly, of course, civil. Please, everybody be civil. Be civil amongst yourselves. Do whatever the fuck you want to be. But be civil amongst yourselves so me and my friends don't have to, like, moderate anything. That's a waste of time. It's finals. It's fine. Actually, this will probably be out after finals. I don't fucking know. I'm yapping. But... I'm not professional talking about this. I just like writing. I like writing analytical crap. And I wanted to do it on the channel for once. So, on the channel I did. And now you'll hear me clicking because we're getting into fan mail. Today, we have fan mail from Skyler and from... I'm just going to call this guy Miiiight Lover. Miiiight Lover Minaj. So, Miiiight Lover, Skyler. Anybody wants to watch fan mail, go to that info card right up there. But before you go, subscribe. Thank you all for any and all support, man. Y'all rock. And join the Discord server too. So, as per usual. Here's the mantra. Say the line, Bart. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord server, Mansion Basement, bind it. Fan mail viewers, go up there. Alright.